Advanced remoting, custom session configurations. One of the neat things you can do with Windows PowerShell, both version 2 and everything after that, is create custom remoting endpoints. Now, version 3, which is what you're going to see me use in this nugget, gave us some commands that make it pretty easy to set this up. So what I'm going to try and do is create an endpoint that's going to allow someone from my help desk to enable and disable Active Directory user accounts. Trick is, I only want members of my help desk being able to use this capability, and I don't want to actually give them permission to enable or disable AD accounts. I only want them to be able to do it through this particular channel. That way, if one of them gets their hands on Active Directory users and computers or something, they can't do anything there because they won't have any native permissions in Active Directory. This whole concept is called delegated administration, and I think you're going to think it's pretty cool. I'm going to start by setting up a test group and user in the domain. Then I'm going to use a commandlet to define a session configuration. And that configuration will describe the module that I want loaded into the endpoint and the subset of commands that I actually want to be visible. We'll then register that configuration on the server, and as part of that, I'll not only point back to this session configuration, but also specify some other attributes, like the user account I want used to actually run the commands so that I don't have to give my help desk users permissions, and a list of users that are allowed to connect to this session, and that'll be my help desk group. We'll then test the whole thing. I'll actually launch a copy of Windows PowerShell using my test user and verify that they're able to run just the commands I specified and that it's reasonably difficult for them to work around those restrictions, if not impossible. So my goal here is to create a remoting endpoint that is only accessible to members of a particular user group in our domain. So to kind of kick things off, I want to just go ahead and create that user group and create a user to go in it. I really should do this from the command line. Sorry, just can't bring myself to use the graphical user interface in a series about Windows PowerShell. This doesn't make sense. Okay, let's see. New AD group. So we're going to do a new AD group. We're going to call it, let's just call it help desk. The group scope is going to be a domain global. One of the, by the way, everything I'm showing you here should work just the same in PowerShell version 2. What I'm doing right now obviously requires the Active Directory commandlets, which you can either consume directly on a domain controller, because they'll live there if it's a 2008 R2 or later DC, or those same commandlets come in the Windows 7 and Windows 8 remote server administration toolkits. So version 2, version 3 doesn't matter. That's where you would get this particular command. So let's see, that's the group scope. We need a group category, which is a security group. One neat thing about using PowerShell version 3 is that's tab completing some of those parameter values for me. Just makes it a lot easier. I really think that's all I have to put. We should give it a SAM account name, I suppose. We'll call it help desk. There we go. Now let's create a new user. Now we've created users in previous nuggets, but one of the things I never did was provide a password for them. So I want to that's a good way to do this. Help set AD account password. Let's do that in the window, because there's a good example in here that I intend to steal from. I'm not actually going to use this command, but there's an example of how to specify the passwords. It's right there in example 1. I'll put that at the bottom of the screen. Okay. New AD user. AD user spelled correctly. Name. Oh, I don't know. Rhonda. That's my mom's name. We'll use her. SAM account name, Rhonda. That's what she'll log on as. Let's say password never expires, just because I don't want to have to deal with that. Account password is going to be convert to secure string. And that's because this command, all the Active Directory commands actually require that you specify passwords not as a clear text string, but as a secure string. So I'm going to convert this plain text, and I think you have to throw a force on here. I'm going to convert that plain text into the secure string in a parenthetical. That'll feed the secure string to the minus account password parameter. We'll put her in the department help, give her the title, technician, city, Bowie. Okay. Now we need to add her to that group. So add AD group member. Let's look at the help for that too. So you can kind of see the syntax as I'm typing it. Help, add AD group member, add AD group member. The identity of the group is help desk. The members, and I have to retrieve the principals here. An easy way to do this is to provide SAM account names. It should take that. And I think that should be all I have to do. Good. So let's get AD group, help desk. Check that out. Good. Now let's do an FL star so we can see all the properties. Good, that looks fine. Now, I think just to double check everything, because sometimes when you're just learning the commands, it's easy to quickly check things in the old graphical console, so we'll go ahead and do that. That won't make me feel too bad, because it should already be done. Here's help desk. Members. There's Rhonda. You notice that Rhonda's account is disabled, because I forgot to actually explicitly enable it. So let's go ahead and do that. Enable account. There we go. The icon changed, doesn't have a little down arrow anymore. Could have done that in the shell with enable-AD account. That would have been the command that did that. Okay, now we're kind of set up on who I want to get to this thing. So when I create the endpoint, I will have the security principles in existence that I want to assign to that endpoint. And my goal is to actually have this new endpoint running on our domain controller. So I'm going to remote into that now. Enter PS session, computer name, dc.lab.pri. So now that I'm here, I want to create a new PS session configuration file. Help, new PS session configuration file. You see, you can't do show window from a remote session. So you're going to have to rely on the regular help. There we go. I can actually do that in a couple of windows if I want to, but there's not too many parameters to remember here. So another way I'll do this is I'll just grab my trusty little post-it note thing here and I'll copy down the ones I want. The first thing we're going to need to provide is a path. Now that path has to be a file name that ends in a PSSC file name extension. That's actually documented here, right here. The file has a PSSC file name extension. So that's the path. Then I need to decide if I want to provide some of this metadata, author, company name, copyright, description. You should probably do some of that in a production environment. I choose not to. I do want to specify modules to import. Modules to import. We'll talk a minute about the PS language mode. I don't know that I'm actually going to set it here, but we'll take a look at that parameters in more detail because it is something you might want to use. If this needs to bind to a specific version of PowerShell, you can do that. You can have it pre-execute some scripts. So every time someone connects to this thing, there's a script that gets loaded. And regardless of the modules you import, you can specify a list of commandlets that are going to be available. So visible commandlets. Some of the commands that you might be used to running might not actually be commandlets. They might be functions. So you're going to have to look at whatever it is you want to make available and determine if it is a commandlet or a function so that it gets listed in the right spot. You can also define some variables, decide what aliases are going to be visible, and decide what providers are going to be visible. If you don't specify any of the visibility commands or parameters, then everything loaded is visible. If you specify one of the visible parameters, then only the things you specify as being visible will be visible. Now my goal is to set up an endpoint that loads the Active Directory module on my domain controller, but I only want to expose the enable AD account and disable AD account commands. So I need to get those because I need to see if they're commands or if they're functions. So let's go with noun AD account. So here they are, disable AD account and enable AD account. They are both of the command type commandlet, so they're not functions. So I needed to know that, so that's good. So let's now run new PS session configuration file. path. I'm just going to put this in my C drive for convenience. Helpdesk.pssc. It will yell at you if you don't provide that PSSC file name extension. Modules to import, Active Directory, visible command, aliases commandlets, is going to be enable AD account and disable AD account. So regardless of what other commands are in that Active Directory module, these are the only two that are going to exist in this particular session. Now, I'm not going to play with the language mode right now, but we're going to talk about it in one moment. Okay, and if we look at that file, it's really just a text file. So once you've created this thing, you can go in here and manually modify it. You'll notice that because I didn't provide any visible functions, this is commented out. That's what that hash character is. That's a comment. When I did provide it, it sets it up. And if we look at the very top of this, you'll notice that it starts with an @ and a curly bracket. This entire file is basically just a giant hash table, a construct you've seen several times. And it consists of a bunch of keys and their values, key, value, and so forth. I've left the execution policy in this session configuration at restricted, meaning whoever uses this won't be easily able to run scripts, but they will have access to the full PowerShell scripting language. And that's that language mode we talked about. Let's take a look at that. Help set, new PS session configuration file -full. Let's go down to that language mode. You get through all the examples. Language mode. So the language mode specifies how PowerShell's script language is going to work. Full language means you get to use everything. Constrained language means that a command that contains a script won't be allowed. Constrained really restricts users to just the .NET Framework type objects and methods. No language means users can run commandlets and functions, but they're not permitted to use any language elements like a script block or something else. Here's the security trick around this. By specifying full language, as I did, instead of no language, I give my user the ability to run script blocks, which could potentially be used by a clever user to import additional modules or to run commands that I didn't intend them to. So you do get a little bit dicey with the restrictions here in the security bit. Your fourth option is restricted language. And this is the one you can really get messed up on. It sits somewhere between no language and full language, and it means users can run commands and functions, but they're not permitted to use script blocks or variables, except for a few key variables like $true, $false, and $null. Only basic comparison operators are available. They can't use assignment statements, property references, or even call methods directly. So how you piece these together really depends on what it is you need to lock down and how you need to do it. It's definitely worth researching these a little bit. Now, at this point, I have not actually created the new endpoint. All I've done is I've created a file on disk that defines the capabilities of the new endpoint. So my next step is actually going to be to register that endpoint. The problem with registering it through a remoting connection like this is that, number one, I don't know the text security descriptor string that I need. And I can't use the show security descriptor UI because remoting connections like this don't support a user interface. Now, I could remote desktop into the server, but I hate doing that. I could log on to the server's console directly, but I'm kind of bound and determined to do this remotely. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come back over here, and just on my local computer, I'm going to say register PS session configuration, name test, show security descriptor UI. This will make sense in just a second, I hope. Yes, proceed. You may proceed. You may proceed. Show security descriptor UI. I'm going to leave administrators on here. I'm going to remove interactive. You'll notice that administrators have got full control. I'm going to add my domain help desk group. Check names. Good. Good. Let's give them read and write and execute permissions. which amounts to full, but it's what I want to do for them. We'll hit OK. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to get PS session configuration, name help desk, and I'm going to pipe it to format list star. Oops. Oh, what did it get named? Test, right. Duh, I just did that. Getting ahead of myself. I want the final one to be called help desk. This is my security descriptor SDDL. So I am going to pop up a copy in Notepad. I'm going to copy and paste this into the Notepad. Delete that little carriage return there so I get one nice long line of security descriptor language. Remove PS session configuration, or no, it's, what is it? I registered, so I forget. Get command, this is how you remember, noun, PS session configuration, get, disable PS session configuration. No, because that's the opposite of enable. I want to register it. Unregister. That makes sense. Unregister PS session configuration name test. And all the yes, no's are you sure you want to do this? And it does restart the WinRM service to make it active. So you do have to kind of be aware that you're going to kick anybody out of the system potentially. Okay. So I think we're good to go. Now keep that in mind. I'm about to remote into my domain controller, run this command, and this command is going to kick me out because it's going to restart the WinRM service if I let it. So I'm going to have to decide how I want to handle that. I'll show you how I think I want to handle it. Let's get back into my domain controller though. Enter PS session computer name dc.lab.pri. The command we're going to use again is register PS session configuration. Now there's a few parameter sets to fuss with here. So I have to decide which one we want to use. I definitely need to provide the name parameter. You'll notice that the name parameter is mandatory. It is not contained entirely within square brackets. The name of mine is going to be help desk. Let's see, what else do I want to configure here? I can specify maximum received data size per command. I can specify a few things. I have another spot I could list the modules to import. I'm going to use no service restart because I don't want to restart the WinRM service right away. I'm going to specify a run as credential. Now that means when someone who connects to this, and remember, only the people in my help desk user group are going to be able to connect to this endpoint, whatever commands they run are actually going to run as this credential. So I'm not going to give them permission to enable or disable accounts. I'm going to let them do it in this endpoint or this session configuration. And instead of running under their permissions, it's going to run under a domain administrator's permissions because that's what I'm going to provide. I'll need to provide my security descriptor UI. We're going to look at session type in just a second here. I can have a script run at the beginning if I want to. And then one of these other parameter sets, gosh, it's so hard to read through these things, is going to have a file or a path parameter. Here it is, path. That's going to actually load most of the behavioral information right from my configuration file rather than me specifying some of this stuff. Because you'll notice that while this command also allows me to specify a startup script and modules to load, it does not allow me to lock down the visibility of commands. You have to do that with a session configuration file. So that's why I'm going to use this parameter set, which allows me to specify that session configuration file that I've already created. So I still want to look at, what was the other command parameter that I said we wanted to do? Oh, I remember. Let's do a full help on this. We can walk through the rest of the parameters. Because you get to use a, looking for it, here we go, session type. An empty session has no commands except what you specify. A default session gives you all of the PowerShell core commands. So that does include import module, which gives someone the ability to import other modules. I'm going to set my session type, and I'm just writing this down so I don't forget, my session type to restricted remote server. That gives them a command to exit the session, which I think is very helpful. They can get a list of commands that are available. They can get help for those commands. They can measure things. They can select properties, but they can't really do anything harmful. So, and by the way, this was new in PowerShell 3. You won't have this in PowerShell version 2. So let's try this out. Register PS session configuration, path. Oh, come on, just give me path. My path is helpdesk PSSE. The name of this is going to be helpdesk. The session type, actually I'm going to leave the session type. Let's just do the security descriptor UL, or SDDL. That goes in quotes, and I need to get it out of here. Select all, copy to clipboard, paste. We're going to hope to heck that's right. No service restart. Run as credential. And I'm going to specify my administrator account. It's going to prompt me for the password if I spell this correctly. And that's good. Let's just go with that. There's the prompt for the password. Weird how that works, but no other UI does. That's because this actually gets handled locally. And you'll notice that it actually says this credential is being requested by a script on the dc.lab PRI remote computer. Okay, what is it asking me? Am I sure I want to register this? Yes. Okay, now it's telling me this is not going to take effect until the WinRM service is restarted. That's perfectly okay. I'm going to go ahead and cleanly exit my session, and then I'm going to have it restart that remotely. A couple of ways I could do that, but I think the easy one is invoke command, script block, restart service WinRM to computer, computer name, dc.lab.pri. Now we'll give it a second for that to restart because I need that to get back in. And see if it's restarted. Yep, looks like it did. Get PS session configuration. There's a test one from earlier. Here's my help desk one. And it looks like lab help desk is allowed. Awesome. So that should work okay. So let's exit that session. Close down the notepad here. Shouldn't need that anymore. And we're done. We've created the thing. Okay, now it's time to test this. And I'm making myself a little bit of a rearranged screen here, and I'll show you why. I need to launch a copy of PowerShell as this other person, as Rhonda. Remember, Rhonda belongs to the help desk group. So that's who I want to test this as. Get her password in there. I get a new PowerShell window. And here's what I'm going to try and do. Invoke command on the configuration name helpdesk. That's the configuration I set up, the endpoint name. On the computer, dc.lab.pri. And the command I want to try and run is enable AD account identity. Look, it popped up and it's doing the tab completion for me, Don J. Let's see if that works. No news is good news. It must have worked. Let's go back over here as a domain administrator and get AD account Don J. Select all. Oops. Get AD user. Looking good. Enabled true. That's what we were after. So let's try a couple other things. Let's try remove AD user. Ooh, failed. Remove AD user is not recognized. That's because I didn't create that help desk endpoint to even have that command. Okay, well, let's just see. I mean, my local computer here has got the Active Directory module, so let's see if she can, remember, this black window is Rhonda. Let's see if she can import the Active Directory module. Active Directory. Why do this remotely? Let's just remove the AD user account now. Yeah, I'm sure. You don't have permission. Remember that help desk group I just made, it doesn't have any special permissions in Active Directory. The only reason the enable AD account worked is because that remote endpoint is running the command under a different account than the account of the person who logged in. Okay. Let's see if we can get her to fuss with it. Let's just interactively enter that session. Enter PS session, configuration name, oops, help desk on computer, dc.lab.pri. Holy smokes, I can't do it. Because one of the things it tries to do when you enter a session interactively like that is figure out what commands are available. And it does that by internally running get command, and I didn't give it get command. So because get command doesn't exist, she can't interactively use that session. The only way she can use that is by using invoke command and sending the command over, and she's only going to be able to run the commands that I loaded into that space, which is enable AD account and disable AD account. And those are going to run under someone else's permissions. So this is a pretty neat little thing. Now, if you can imagine, and this is something that we're going to talk about in a nugget much later, building a little GUI tool that runs this under the hood. So your help desk user doesn't even have to remember this command. They're just going to use a GUI that you provide them that we're going to write in PowerShell. But if they're clever, you got that clever help desk person, and they figure out what's going on under the hood and they think, I'm going to work around it. I'm going to skip the GUI. They still can't do anything special or different than what that GUI was enabling them to do. So I think this is a really, really cool set of tools. I think it's a really awesome technique. I can imagine environments where you've got one server sitting in the data center that has lots of these endpoints set up, each one kind of tweaked down for a particular use by a particular set of computers. And I think it's an awesome way to implement delegated administration. I started by setting up a test group and a test user that we could play with. I then used new PS session configuration file to define the session configuration, including the module that it would load and the commandlets from that module that would actually be visible. I used register PS session configuration to register that on the server, including some other behavioral attributes, including a run as credential and the SDDL that described who would be able to actually connect to that thing. We then tested the configuration. We confirmed that the user was able to send the two commandlets I had allowed and to complete them successfully, even though she didn't have permission to run those commands on her own outside of that session configuration. We also verified that the configuration was not able to be used interactively, so provided a pretty decently locked down, delegated administration interface. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.